The silence inside the mountain. Smash that subscribe button like it owes you answers. Hit like if you're brave enough to keep watching, and drop a comment now, because once the story starts, there's no turning back. The convoy screamed through the Colorado night, red and blue lights slicing across the empty highway like warning flares. State troopers, unmarked federal SUVs, armored vans, every vehicle moving as if one wrong turn could cost lives. At the center of it all was a single black transport truck, its windows sealed, its cargo silent. No press. No announcement. Just speed, secrecy, and fear. By dawn, the gates of ADX Florence swallowed the convoy whole. The guards called it the Alcatraz of the Rockies, but that nickname didn't come close to capturing the truth. ADX Florence wasn't just a prison. It was a destination for men the system believed could not be controlled anywhere else. Terrorists, crime lords, masterminds who ran empires from behind bars until the walls closed in completely. Here, the cells were concrete tombs. The silence was engineered. The isolation was absolute. And on that morning, the silence was broken. 2 hours after intake, an emergency alarm echoed through cell block D. Not a riot siren. Not a medical alert. Something else. Something rarer. Guards froze. Procedures kicked in. Doors sealed. Cameras focused. Inside a cell designed to eliminate risk, they found a body. The inmate was Elias Cade, officially a domestic extremist with international ties, unofficially a legend whispered about in intelligence briefings. He had been transferred under extreme secrecy after a federal task force dismantled a network stretching from the Midwest to Eastern Europe. Cade was supposed to vanish into ADX Florence, buried alive by concrete and routine. Instead, he was dead. No visible injuries. No struggle. No obvious explanation. The cell door was locked from the outside. The cameras showed nothing unusual. And yet, the man who had survived manhunts, betrayals, and years underground was gone less than half a day after arriving. The Bureau called it suspicious. The warden called it impossible. Special Agent Mara Klein arrived before noon. She had built her career on cases that didn't make sense, the kind everyone else quietly pushed aside. She stood in the narrow corridor outside Cade's cell, staring through reinforced glass at a scene that felt wrong in ways she couldn't yet name. ADX Florence was designed to remove variables. Inmates spent nearly every hour alone. Meals were passed through slots. Recreation happened in concrete pens under open sky, one prisoner at a time. Communication between cells was nearly non-existent. So how did a man die in total isolation? Klein reviewed the intake footage frame by frame. Cade walked under his own power. No signs of distress. No resistance. His eyes, however, told a different story. He scanned every corner, every camera, as if searching for something or someone. Just before disappearing into the cell block, he looked directly into the lens and smiled. It wasn't fear. It was recognition. The autopsy report deepened the mystery. No toxins detected. No trauma. Heart failure, they said. Natural causes.
Case closed. Klein didn't buy it.
She requested Cade's transfer file, every document, every interview, every redacted line. What she found raised more questions than answers. During interrogation weeks earlier, Cade had asked for one thing repeatedly: confirmation that he was being sent to ADX Florence. Not a plea. Not a threat. A request. Why would a man fight to be sent to the most restrictive prison in the country? As Klein dug deeper, names began to surface. Not just criminals, but legends. Men whose reputations had grown so large they felt mythic. International terrorists, cartel strategists, lone wolf bombers, financiers of violence. All housed in the same mountain fortress. All officially cut off from the world. Unofficially, something else was happening. A veteran guard, 20 years at ADX, agreed to speak off the record. He described patterns no one wanted to acknowledge. Inmates who never spoke yet seemed to anticipate events. Men who filed grievances referencing incidents that hadn't occurred yet. Whispers carried through vents that shouldn't transmit sound. People think this place kills communication, the guard said quietly. But it just changes how it moves. Klein learned that Cade had crossed paths with another inmate years earlier, Marcus Vale, a convicted terrorist strategist serving multiple life sentences. Vale had been declared completely non-communicative after repeated isolation violations. No mail, no visits, no privileges. Yet the day before Cade's arrival, Vale had requested a Bible. Inside it, guards later found a single line, underlined in pen. "The mountain listens." The warden dismissed it as coincidence. Klein did not. She pulled phone logs, maintenance records, even HVAC schematics. That's when she noticed it, a maintenance request filed months earlier for a sealed corridor beneath cell block D. The reason listed was vague. Structural review. No follow-up notes. No final approval. The corridor wasn't on any standard map. When Klein asked for access, the warden hesitated. ADX Florence ran on order and secrecy. Questions disrupted both. But federal authority carried weight, and by nightfall, Klein stood before a steel door embedded in concrete, its surface scarred with age. The keycard worked. The lock disengaged with a low mechanical groan. As the door opened, cold air rushed out, carrying a smell that didn't belong in a prison built to erase history. And when the lights flickered on, Klein realized Elias Cade hadn't come to ADX Florence to disappear. He had come to deliver a message. And whatever waited in that hidden corridor proved that some legends inside ADX Florence were still very much alive. The network beneath the silence. The hidden corridor beneath cell block D was never meant to exist. Agent Mara Klein moved slowly, her footsteps echoing off concrete walls that looked older than the rest of ADX Florence. The air felt stale, heavy, like it had been sealed away on purpose. Overhead lights flickered weakly, revealing a narrow passage lined with outdated wiring, abandoned conduit panels, and something far more disturbing, handwritten markings scratched directly into the concrete.
Dates. Names.
Symbols. None of it matched official prison records. This place was decommissioned. The warden insisted behind her, his voice tight. At least it was supposed to be. Klein stopped at a recessed alcove where several vent shafts converged. The metal grates were newer than the surrounding structure, installed with care. Someone had upgraded this section quietly, professionally. She knelt and examined the screws, recent tool marks, cleaned but not erased. ADX Florence was designed to silence men forever. But someone had been listening. As forensic teams moved in, Klein's phone buzzed. A classified alert from the Joint Terrorism Task Force. Subject of interest, Marcus Vale. Status update requested. Reason: intercepted chatter overseas referencing the mountain and the echo. The same words underlined in Vale's Bible. Klein returned to the control room and pulled Vale's surveillance feeds. The man sat alone in his cell, cross-legged on the concrete floor, eyes closed. He hadn't moved in hours. No speaking. No gestures. Nothing that would trigger concern. Yet when Klein watched the footage from the exact moment Elias Cade died, Vale opened his eyes and smiled. That smile haunted her. She requested permission for a direct interview. The warden objected. Vale was one of ADX Florence's most tightly controlled inmates. Any deviation from protocol risked precedent and exposure. But the facts were stacking up too fast. During the interview, Vale sat across from reinforced glass, wrists cuffed, posture relaxed. He looked thinner than his photos but sharper somehow, his eyes alert, calculating. "You know why I'm here," Klein said. Vale chuckled softly. "You're here because something impossible happened. And impossible things bother people like you." Elias Cade died within hours of arriving, Klein replied. No contact. No cause. No explanation. Vale leaned forward slightly. Then your system worked perfectly. Klein felt the tension rise. You're saying his death was expected? I'm saying, Vale replied calmly, that Cade was never meant to live here. He was meant to arrive. The interview ended abruptly when Vale refused to answer further questions. But before guards escorted him away, he left her with one final sentence. Check the maintenance logs from 7 years ago, he said. That's when the silence broke. Back in her temporary office, Klein dug through archived records, construction permits, renovation budgets, emergency repairs. 7 years earlier, ADX Florence had undergone a classified infrastructure upgrade authorized under a counterterrorism initiative. The justification was vague: containment reinforcement. But buried beneath layers of redaction was a subcontractor name that caught her attention. A private security engineering firm with international ties and a troubling history of intelligence manipulation. As Klein cross-referenced the firm's past projects, a pattern emerged: black sites, offshore detention centers, places where information didn't just disappear, it was redirected. ADX Florence hadn't just been built to isolate criminals. It had been quietly modified to study them. The realization hit hard. If true, it meant the most dangerous minds in the world had been unknowingly housed inside a controlled environment designed to observe how influence spreads, even without direct contact. A laboratory of criminal psychology. And Elias Cade had known. Before she could process the implications, another alert came in. This one from internal security. An ADX Florence staff member was missing. Officer Daniel Ruiz, a night shift technician with access to maintenance corridors, hadn't clocked out. His locker was untouched. His last recorded movement placed him near the sealed corridor beneath cell block D. Security footage showed Ruiz entering the corridor alone. He never came back out. Search teams combed the prison from top to bottom. No sign of Ruiz. No alarms triggered. No evidence of escape. It was as if he had vanished into the concrete itself. Then the discovery came. Inside Ruiz's abandoned workstation, investigators found a flash drive taped beneath the desk. The files were encrypted, but one video played without a password. It showed Ruiz whispering urgently into the camera, sweat on his brow, eyes darting off-screen. "They're communicating," he said. "Not talking, coordinating. Patterns, routines, timing. The vents, the pipes, the electrical hum. It's like a code. I shouldn't have listened, but once you hear it." The video cut out. As technicians worked to decrypt the remaining files, Klein received another blow. One of the encrypted folders carried a familiar name. Mara Klein. Her personnel file. Her past cases. Her movements. Someone inside ADX Florence had been watching her long before she arrived. The final decrypted document was a schematic, an updated map of the hidden corridors, vent networks, and acoustic pathways running beneath the prison. At the center of it all was a single highlighted node. Cell block D. And beneath it, a handwritten note scanned into the file. Phase 1 complete. Arrival confirmed. Witness removed. Klein felt a chill crawl up her spine. Elias Cade hadn't been the target. He had been the trigger. As alarms suddenly blared across ADX Florence, this time not a drill, not a mistake, Klein realized the truth was already moving into its next phase. And whatever was coming next had been planned by men the world believed were buried alive. The legends don't stay buried. ADX Florence went into full lockdown. Steel doors slammed shut across every wing, sealing inmates inside concrete cells that suddenly felt far less controlled than anyone had believed. Red lights pulsed in the corridors. Guards moved in tight formations, hands hovering near restraints, eyes darting toward corners they had passed 1,000 times before, corners that now felt unfamiliar. Agent Mara Klein stood in the control room, staring at the schematic recovered from Officer Ruiz's flash drive. The prison wasn't just a grid of cells and corridors. It was a living system of sound, vibration, airflow, and timing. A network designed to carry information invisibly. The most chilling part wasn't how sophisticated it was. It was how long it had gone unnoticed. Phase 1 complete, Klein murmured. Arrival confirmed. Witness removed. Elias Cade hadn't been silenced. He had been activated. The truth came together in fragments. Years earlier, when ADX Florence underwent its classified upgrades, intelligence agencies believed they were reinforcing containment. In reality, a parallel project had been embedded within the prison's redesign, an experiment to observe whether extreme isolation truly neutralized influence. It didn't. Instead, the most dangerous minds adapted. Without words. Without contact. Using routines, mechanical rhythms, ventilation noise, and shared observation schedules, a select group of inmates began to synchronize. They learned how to send signals through silence itself. Not messages anyone could overhear, patterns only another strategist would recognize. Marcus Vale had been one of the first. Elias Cade had been one of the last pieces. Cade's role was never to survive ADX Florence. He was proof of concept, a courier whose arrival signaled that the outside world was ready. His death inside a locked cell ensured maximum attention, maximum confusion, and minimum suspicion of coordination.
And it worked.
As the lockdown dragged on, Klein ordered simultaneous psychological evaluations of every inmate connected to the hidden network. One by one, anomalies surfaced. Men who adjusted posture at the same minute every day. Inmates who stopped pacing precisely when ventilation cycles shifted. Tiny deviations, meaningless on their own, devastating in aggregate. They weren't planning an escape. They were shaping events beyond the walls. Then came the final revelation. Ruiz's remaining encrypted files contained financial records routed through shell charities, disaster relief funds, and legal defense pools. The money didn't fund operations inside ADX Florence. It funded operations outside. The legends imprisoned in the mountain weren't commanding armies anymore. They were inspiring them, seeding ideology, guiding strategy, letting loyal followers believe they were acting independently. ADX Florence had become a myth engine. The warden demanded the Bureau shut everything down, restrict schedules, randomize routines, dismantle vent pathways. But it was already too late. The network didn't rely on infrastructure alone. It relied on belief. Klein requested one final interview with Marcus Vale. This time, when Vale entered the room, he looked tired but satisfied. "You built the perfect monument to silence," he told her calmly. "You just didn't understand what silence does to people like us." "You manipulated the system," Klein said. "Used it to coordinate crimes from inside a supermax prison." Vale shook his head.
No.
"We proved something. That fear doesn't require proximity. Control doesn't require visibility." "What was Phase 2? Klein asked. Vale smiled faintly. "You're standing in it." Before she could press further, alarms cut through the room again. Not internal this time. External alerts. Emergency broadcasts lighting up screens across the control center. A coordinated series of arrests was underway across 3 countries. Cells dismantled, assets seized, suspects detained. The operations had been planned for months by agencies working independently, each believing they were acting on isolated intelligence. They weren't. All roads traced back to ideas that originated inside ADX Florence. The prison hadn't failed to contain the legends. It had preserved them. In the aftermath, the story the public received was clean and simple. Elias Cade died of natural causes. Officer Ruiz was declared a victim of an internal security breach. The hidden corridors were sealed. Protocols were updated. Officially, the threat was neutralized. Unofficially, the Bureau dismantled the experimental infrastructure and dispersed the remaining inmates, transfers designed to sever any lingering synchronization. Marcus Vale was moved to a facility even more restrictive, his isolation absolute. Or so they believed. Months later, Klein received a plain envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No signature. No explanation. Just a sentence. "Silence adapts." Klein stared at the words, understanding settling in slowly. ADX Florence had been exposed, but the lesson it revealed couldn't be erased. Somewhere, someone had learned from it. Somewhere, another system was already being tested. The mountain still stood. The cells were still locked. But legends didn't need freedom to survive. They only needed someone to listen. And if you think this story was intense, you're not ready for what's coming next. Stay close. The silence always has more to say. Subscribe now for more.